Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. Back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the FPV News. How you doing, Blunty?
Good. How's it going, Joshua?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm very happy to be back here with you. In some ways, this is the highlight of my week. You know, I'm always stressed. I'm making videos. I got to do this. I got to answer. And I just get to sit down, and you have prepared a smorgasbord of news for us to sit down and talk about. It's relaxing, and it feels like I'm doing something right. So awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I definitely always enjoy it as well. It's fun to get together and discuss all the stuff from the week.
Yeah.
See what happened and figure out where everything's going. And we've got a bunch of news this week, as we do many weeks.
We do. In fact, just this afternoon, we got a big story about Rotor, Riot, and Redcat, and we got yesterday. We got some news about DJI backwards compatibility that someone may have leaked on this. We'll talk about that and more good stuff. But before we get into all that, let me just say welcome to you guys in the chat. Very good to see you here as well. Let's see here. We got you in the chat. I got you up here. Discord, I got you over here as well. And I'll be checking you out during the stream. But let's dive in, Blunty, to our very first topic. And our first topic is always the public service announcements. Little important things that affect some people, but they really are affecting you if they do affect you. What do we got?
Yeah, and the first one's going to affect anybody who watches the news, because we're going to let people know that there is no news next week, right? We've got a week off because you're going to be gone.
That is true.
Right?
Well, yeah. So we're not going to be. In fact, I have no live streams this coming weekend, and then I think I'm going to be back probably the Monday after that. But certainly we will only miss one news because I know how important the news is. I have a consulting engagement that I'm going to. I do those every now and then, and so I'll be gone. And people, Blunty, and people always say, well, just let Blunty do the news. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just don't feel like it's the same if it's just, because I mean, I host it, I stream it, our banter, and I'm like, no. We're not going to do that. I know you would if I asked you to, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So.
I like our dynamic, and that's what people are here for, I think, to get the news from us.
Yeah,
so.
That's true. So no news next week. But the week after that, I'll be back. We got one other PSA about a bug in Betaflight. A bug in Betaflight.
I think a lot of people were seeing this and were confused about some broken flight controllers and weren't sure what was going on. There's a lot of confusion going on. So if you had a flight controller with an SD card that did not work in 4.3, it probably works now in 4.3.2. Basically, there was a fatal error issue, and the SD cards were not initializing on SPI. So if you have a flight controller that uses an SPI SD card solution, some don't, but many do. I believe one of these was the SpeedyBee flight controller. If you flash 432, it will now work. So.
And is 432 available from the configurator? So it's released.
Released yesterday, yes.
Okay, so I'm just scrolling through this GitHub page where all the devs were talking about this. It's kind of cool that this stuff is public and we can literally see the devs work out the problem in real time. But it seems like it affected F405, F4, and not F7. Is that right?
I'm not. I think the more, from what I could tell, it was based. I think the end result was that it was an SPI problem, like an SPI SD card initialization problem.
So even F7s were affected.
I think so. Dominic Clifton Hyder was in there talking about it, but I think his issue was he was using a different method to initialize the SD card, so he was not seeing it on his H7, and so
gotcha.
I think that was why.
Chris Sagarian in the chat says SpeedyBee problems, shocker. Now, Chris, I personally think SpeedyBee flight controllers are pretty solid. You may disagree, but I want to be really clear to anybody watching that this was a Betaflight bug that affected lots of flight controllers, and this is not in any way anything that SpeedyBee or any of the flight controller manufacturers did wrong. The Betaflight devs made a mistake. They fixed it. And if you have an SD card on your flight controller that won't initialize, download and flash Betaflight 4.3.2, which is the latest release, came out yesterday, and that should fix it.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. That's the PSA.
All right.
Oh boy. Now we get to talk about our three favorite things to talk about are Redcat, DJI, and dogs and drones.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, today we got some Redcat news. But it's not what you think.
Yeah, Redcat might not be in the news as much now based on this information. Because basically, we've talked about Redcat a lot because their consumer division, which is Rotor, Riot, and Fat Shark. And today we have learned that they plan to divest to their consumer division. So basically, they are selling off Rotor, Riot, and Fat Shark to a company.
Blah 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 blah. Boil it down for me, Blunty.
Yeah, so basically, it's like a $15 million value, I believe, something like that, in different pieces. They are keeping stock options in the new company. This company is called Unusual Machines. They have a cash page on Google it's kind of generic, but basically, it's a company that just changed from another name called AeroCarve US. And if you take a look at the agent name on this listing we have from Unusual Machines and the agent and incorporator of this company, we find that is Jeff Thompson. And we know Jeff Thompson is the CEO and owner of Redcat.
Yes.
So my guess here is basically they're divesting off into a separate company, right? That Jeff Thompson will it seems to be at least be the incorporator of, they're divesting that off into a different thing so they can focus on, they talked about, I heard a investor call today. I sat on the investor call. Basically they said that they're focusing on defense. Redcat is. So they're selling off this consumer division. They're launching a new drone. They're going to ramp up teal production with the money they're getting from this. And basically they're focused on defense, and they feel like Rotor, Riot, and Fat Shark have suffered. So they're basically slinging them off to this new company, which seems like it'll be still Jeff Thompson, but maybe consumer focus versus commercial military focus.
One of the takeaways from this, when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, I mean, Redcat is just kicking them to the curb. Like, from a business perspective, it sort of makes sense. Like I've always wondered what Redcat's interest in Fat Shark and Rotor Riot is, because on the one hand, they are companies with revenue. I was going to say profitable, but I'm not 100% sure whether that's true. And so it makes sense why someone who's trying to get a company together like Redcat would want them in their sort of portfolio. But on the other hand, they're not what's going to take Redcat like to the moon. It's going to be a giant government contract for Teal or something like that. And so I'm like, well, so when I heard they were selling them, I was like, okay, but they're not really kicking them to the curb, are they? It's sort of like Jeff Thompson, who owns and founded Redcat, is going to also own and found Rotor Riot and Fat Shark, just under a different corporate entity.
It seems to be the case from the public available information we have and our best to guess to what we can see. That does seem to be the case. Yeah, I mean, I think from a business perspective, it does make sense to split these. And like you said, for me, my guess would be that a large, when we've talked about Redcat in the last year or two, a lot of our conversation has been about the fact that their revenue is from Rotor Riot and Fat Shark. That's where they get the revenue from. That's all the on-book revenue, because Teal hasn't sold anything or didn't sell anything till like 3 to 6 months ago. And so if you're a company who, made all this money in an IPO and then wants to show investors that you're doing something, I think having revenue, even if it's from a consumer and you're focused on Teal, I think that helps tide over investors over time. And maybe, maybe that's not the case, but to me, having that 5, 6, 7 million, whatever it was in revenue, helps them feel a little better about, hey, we're not doing anything as a company otherwise. We're building up production, we're spending a bunch of money on a Teal, and all these things are happening, and we're looking at contracts, and we're talking to people, and Skypersonic's got a deal going on with Mars stuff, and there's all these pieces, but they don't fit together that well, I think, without this. And it seems to me like, Teal is putting in drones for Tranche 2 now. In 3 to 6 months, they'll be ramping up to thousands of drones a month. They have contracts with NATO companies. So I think we're seeing, now they know they don't need the consumer piece anymore. Now they can just stay focused on military. They don't have to worry about that at all.
Except, and I know I shouldn't take the things that they say in investor calls as anything except marketing. I get that. But at the same time, there's been this story that drone pilots are the cutting edge of drones, FPV racing, and we're going to take these hotshot pilots and use the things that they do to test in the crucible of FPV, and then we're going to roll it out to I don't know. That's how they fit into the portfolio. And then it's like, well, it turns out no.
From my limited investor call stuff, it seems like, like we talked about before, they kind of get on the edge of where reality lives, right? So I think he's just pitching a world in which that could happen, and now they've realized that pivoting makes the most sense. So nobody out and out lies in investor calls, because that gets you in trouble with the SEC, but they sure do push the edge of what is aspirational. I don't know. Also, I just want to point out here, one of the other things here, we talked about, basically it's 18 million was the deal, 5 million in cash, 2.5 million in convertible senior note, 10.5 million in Series A convertible preferred stock of Unusual. So part of this will be all focused on the fact that this has to close so that there's an IPO of this new company that Jeff Thompson is part of. And then it must be a minimum amount of $15 million and approved as a NASDAQ listing to be for everything to finish. To be
That's
complete.
A pretty big if, isn't it?
Of all this, what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a pretty big if, isn't it? I mean, they did the whole reverse merger thing to avoid having to do a legitimate IPO with Redcat.
It seems likely, but I wonder if this is some way to divest risk. I don't know anything about how this investment stuff works, but that may be the case. Is it some kind of way to divest risk if if it doesn't happen? But it does seem the case that they want to still have an IPO'd version of this consumer drone stuff, so they can do stuff with public investment and all these pieces. They just need it in a different company now. So
all right.
It'll be interesting to see how all this unfolds.
It's Not Sam in the Discord says, seems to me that Jeff Thompson picked up $10.5 million in Redcat stock without paying for it.
Unusual stock technically, but yes. Yeah. So it's in the new company stock.
Interesting.
Well,
this new company is going to owe us for the stock. And guess what? The same guy owns the new company, so he gets the stock. Okay. Well, Just a lot of paper shuffling. Who knows what this means for Rotor Riot and Fat Shark? Only time will tell. Everybody's gonna. I mean, I reached out to Drew when I saw this, and there is no public statement at this time, but it's still very fresh. Everybody's going to put the best face on it and tell you it's, this is good for us and this is good for FPV, and then time will tell how it actually plays out. We shall see. There we go. Alrighty.
All right.
Next up,
another favorite of ours is DJI news. So we've got a couple of DJI things to let you know about. First up, DJI Goggles 2. Turns out,
okay, so as you
thing, it's coming.
Oh, it's coming.
It's coming. So we saw some people post on the internet, basically that they updated their Goggles 2, and saw in the menu this new option for the DJI FPV air unit, the one we kind of showed a version of with other drones in it, but now we've got that finally in a firmware that people got to flash to goggles.
Yeah, here we have Madstech's video showing the screen of Madstech's goggles with the option to switch to the DJI FPV air unit. And I just want to be very clear here, Blunty, that everything we're going to talk about in this segment is based on the content of Madstech's video, and that I also saw this option yesterday. I was updating my goggles to make a video about binding the O3 air unit. I thought, I should be on the latest firmware. So I forgot that my account is flagged because I'm so used to being on the outs with DJI. But they put me in the tester group for the new O3 air unit because I was part of the release. And I forgot that I had access to pre-release firmware. And I was like, oh, it's here! And I made a post on my Facebook and on my YouTube, but like, oh, it's here, guys! And then I was like, wait, other people were like, we don't see that option. And they were like, are you in the test group? I was like, oh, shit. So I didn't want to piss them off, so I took it down. And it's great that Madstech put this video out because we can talk about Madstech's video and then I'm not leaking anything. Right? That's
True.
How it works, right?
That's true.
Okay,
that's one way to look at it. Okay.
I hope that's how DJI looks at it.
All right. So, so we got a couple of cool things that we learned here. One thing we had no idea about that we hoped about, but we didn't know. We got canvas mode. Yeah, or
yes.
Fake canvas. MSP Displayport.
MSP Displayport. Thank you. Dominic Clifton will appreciate us saying it correctly.
So yeah, we definitely did not expect that, but that's pretty cool to see that happened. It's kind of as a bonus. Like you said, it's only available for beta and tester accounts. It seems like that might have even been an accidental release to them. It's not clear. So we'll see when this comes out. They said before December, so we would expect sometime in December for this to get finalized. Power output options are very odd right now. It seems like it's sort of adopting a lot of the features of the O3 air unit. So like you get 40 megahertz, 20 megahertz, 10 megahertz channel sizes instead of the 50, 25 like we used to get. You get limited channel counts without the hacks, but the hacks now don't seem to increase power like they did. Like currently you can't see power output options just like the O3. So you can't tell if anything's working. It seems like because you're using the Goggles 2, there's no 1200 milliwatt hack, right, for the Goggles 2. Yeah. So the assumption is that if you do the NACO hack on the air unit while it's on the new firmware, it seems like it's increasing power to 700. So you're getting the FCC power, but you're not getting 1200. But it's pretty rough right now, and it's hard to get any concrete information because DJI doesn't tell you what the power is.
So just to be clear, this requires an update of firmware on the Goggles 2 and an update of firmware on the Vista, on the air unit. And then that enables this functionality. And from what Madstech shows, it seems to sort of convert the Vista over to a sort of way of transmitting that's closer to the O3. For example, Madstech showed that they have the 10 megahertz channels, the 15 megabit per second mode, which was never available on the V2 before. Madstech is in the comments. He says he got the NACO hack working. That's of course.
The 700 milliwatt thing seems to work, but the 1200 does not, is what he was saying, I believe.
Interesting. Yeah. And currently, if somehow you have access to this firmware, also bear in mind that you no longer can bind to the goggles, the V2 goggles, because presumably they also need a firmware update to bind to this new firmware, and it's not available yet, is what I'm hearing.
Also, I don't think the radios have a firmware either.
And they will not bind to the radios. That's also correct. That's what I'm hearing. So if you decide to play with this, know that you're sort of taking a step forward and you're making a lot of your stuff. Presumably when it actually releases, it will be fixed. And there may be other bugs and changes that we don't know about because this is pre-release firmware. But what is exciting about this is it certainly confirms that DJI is going to give us some form of backwards compatibility between the Goggles 2 and the older Air. I mean, at this point, the amount of work they put in means that they're actually going to do it. Now, Madstech had a suggestion. He doesn't think that the V1 goggle is going to get this, and he thinks this is going to be a one-way trip forward, that if you flash all this stuff, your stuff will just stop working with the V1 goggle. And I don't know how many people out there still have the V1s. Yeah.
It definitely could happen. It's hard to know how they'll do it. If that is the case, then I don't know. It'll depend on how the V2 implementation works, right? I think we'll have to see, if you flash the V2s and now there's a new mode, in the O3, in the other side, you know, if it's in that new format and that's how you're binding to the air unit after the update, then I would agree the V1 probably won't get it. If there's just an update to the DIY side of the V2 somehow, and that enables a binding to the new firmware, right?
The change is the problem I think that Madstech is anticipating is that once you put the new firmware on the VTX, it will only bind to an O3 style goggle.
Well, that's
the
what
V1
I mean.
can't do that.
Yeah, we got to find out if the V2 update is on the O3 side to bind with the new air unit, or if it's on the DIY side and there's some solution DJI has to bind. You know what I mean? We don't necessarily know, if there's not a legacy mode in there or some way that it can still bind.
But it would mean that I think the only problem would be if they start shipping air units with this firmware on it. At that point, if that firmware was not backwards compatible with the V1, then the air units would lock out the V1. I think if they continue to ship them with the 0606 firmware on there, then all the V1 pilots have to do is just not update.
Yeah,
and they're fine. Yeah. Okay. Is it true that the maximum output power is 2 watts? Asks Brandon Beans. Brandon Beans, the FCC paperwork says that it could transmit up to 2 watts. We don't know that it does.
It's EIRP. Don't forget that.
Right.
So.
Oh, that includes that's EIRP. That includes the antenna gain.
That's correct. And so I had a long discussion with somebody on WTF, the FPV WTF Discord earlier. And what we kind of figured out is, I think what they're doing, and I don't know for sure, but I think what they're doing is adding in the MIMO gain to the EIRP.
Oh.
Because technically, if you look at how EIRP is calculated with MIMO, you're supposed to add in MIMO gain, and it's 10 times log of whatever the number of TX chains you have.
I see.
So you get 3 dB with 2 TX chains and 6 dB with 4 TX chains. So it's possible that we're seeing the 3 dB increase because they added TX chains, or they were you know what I mean? They're changing it because basically.
So they're not actually blasting 2 watts.
The FCC paperwork still says 700 milliwatts. It's the same as the original air unit. So my guess is that it's still doing what they said it would do, because the original said EIRP less than 30 dBm. And the guess is that means 28.5 plus 1.5, and that would be 700 milliwatts. So that would be legal. Right. So if it's the case that the new one's less than 33 and still says 700, then I would guess that there's 3 dBm from somewhere. Either they're using a different antenna, or they're using a different, a gain from the MIMO or something like that.
You're saying you don't think it has additional actual output power from the RF amplifier?
I don't necessarily think we should use that specific number to guess that. I think we got to use analyzers to find that out somehow.
Well, that's
I don't
typical.
think we've seen evidence.
That's typical. Madstech says there is, it's the same power amplifier. There's no major changes in the front end, which suggests that they would have about the same output power. I mean, you and I have speculated that just the fact that the new system uses H.265 instead of H.264 means it can deliver better image quality at lower bit rates, which will give it better range and penetration in terms of usable range. So, that alone could make a difference. Well, this is exciting. I always say, and I continue to say, wait until we see the final product before we draw any conclusions. For example, there are people out there who have the V1, the black controller, and they use it to fly all their quads. And if that doesn't get forwards compatibility, then the fact that the goggles 2 might get backwards compatibility won't be, they won't feel good about that. But it is nice to see that this is coming, and see the direction it's going.
I mean, it's better than not having it. That's the way I look at it, right? So,
yeah.
Like they did it, and then if you want to use it or not, like that's the sort of way. Yeah.
Like this stupid bug, the binding bug, where when you switch modes, you lose your binds. Still there.
I
So
don't understand
stupid.
why that's. I assume maybe somebody technical from the FPV WTF project can let us know. I remember there being some kind of like flag, and then there's a reason why when you rebind one Vista, all of them come back, and it's because it's still stored in there.
Yeah.
It's just like picking. It's almost like picking the set of binds you're using or something, right? And it seems very weird that it just doesn't toggle that switch when you switch over. Because it has that bank in there.
Yeah, it knows the binds. It just sort of forgets them temporarily. So my point is that bug is a stupid bug that for some people will be a deal breaker, and other people will go, okay, I'm just going to live with it. That's worth it, and everybody will make their own decision. So, Blunty, before we go on, I just want to share the beautiful, beautiful memes that are happening in the Discord. Black Jungle has been making amazing memes, and I feel like they deserve recognition. So here's the meme from back when someone was thinking that Speedy Bee had problems and it was really a Betaflight bug. And here's the meme from Redcat selling Rotor Riot. And we got one more. Here's the meme from the FCC. So and also this. I wouldn't say I'm a connoisseur of memes, but I do appreciate a good meme, and I respect the creators of memes. So, let me shout that out. Okay. What next?
We've got one more DJI story. Some people are confused about pricing, and we wanted to let people understand a little bit about what happened. So a lot of people saw DJI Goggles 2 pricing at $569. There's even a couple websites, but it's still there. But I figure it's better not to share those just directly because we can't verify if they can support that price or not. But what we can tell you is that this happened at a bunch of different places, and Pyrodrone posted a response about that to let us know exactly what happened. Everybody was confused because the price bumped up to $650 from $569, and they were worried that people were like, "Oh, was that a Black Friday price or a sale?" And it turns out that no, that's not the case. DJI changed the price on retailer, so they told retailers, at least Pyrodrone claims that they told retailers that there would be a $569 retail price. That was the map pricing. They charged them X amount of price, that sort of thing. They said, this is what you'll pay, this is what you'll charge. And then they set up pre-orders under that pretense. Then DJI contacted them later and said, hey, it's going to actually be $649. It seems like, currently we don't know. The response was they're not sure if they'll have to pay more or not. DJI has not told them that they'll have to pay more, right? Because they've already paid for the units. So it seems like that they will only pay, whatever they were going to pay, and they are honoring these prices at $569.
Mm-hmm. And good for Pyrodrone. That's a real Chad move, and it's going to cost them. It's going to cost them money.
Well, technically yes, because they could update the price and sell them for the same amount. But it sounds like from what they're saying, DJI hopefully will charge them the same price, and they won't actually take a loss here, right? They'll take a loss on prospective sales, but not on increased cost from DJI, hopefully. So
yeah, I mean, if DJI were to take their money and sell them units at a certain price, and then say, the deal has changed, like Darth Vader, then that would be a pretty, potentially a legally actionable move. Although who knows how that would play out. So probably they're not going to do that. But probably a lot of other stores are just going to jack the price to $569. And Pyro's going to stand by the sales and honor the agreement they had with their customers, even though they won't make as much money as they could otherwise. So good for them. That is a good guy move for them. Frankly, no less than I would expect from Serge and Pyro. That's how he runs his business.
So if you see $569 out there for the DJI Goggles 2, you know why. And, they should be $649. Yeah, if you see them somewhere for that price, feel free to pre-order them because, I saw them at least one retailer today still has them at that price. It's just not clear if they will be able to honor it like Pyro was doing or if you'll end up having to pay more or get a refund. So.
It sounds like it depends a lot on whether the store has already paid for their pre-order at the $569 price. Because presumably when DJI jacked retail, they presumably also will jack the wholesale. They're not just going to give more margin to the stores. So presumably future wholesale orders will be at a higher price. If a store still has the listing up at $569, but they're buying them from DJI at the $649, then the store may not be able to honor that because there may not be enough margin for them to actually cover their profits. So, but it's probably worth putting in the pre-order. You never know.
Right.
Do you remember the ship date for those goggles? Have you heard anything about the ship date?
I saw different numbers, but I didn't see anything concrete because they've been up for a long time.
Yeah.
So, like, I think like the Get FPV and the Pyro, I believe, had a date of sometime in December, but they were up for like weeks. So I wasn't sure if that was like a hard date or a soft date.
Pacific Northwest says Race Day Quad is shipping mid-December. I heard somebody said after New Year, which I was like, oof, that's a long time to wait.
I heard December 10th to the 15th, somewhere in there, but I'm not sure if that's like current or if that was like what was expected before.
Joe Mama says the ship date ETA from DJI to Pyro was January.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Bobby Bag says my goggles too shipped today from DJI.
Okay.
DJI
up there.
You think DJI? You're not gonna speculate about this with me. You're more conservative. Do you think DJI is withholding the wholesale, the reseller shipments and trying to get more direct sales because they get more margin on them?
No, I don't think DJI cares.
That would be irresponsible.
I don't think they care.
Don't they care? Don't they care? Because the video. Listen to this. This is a fact. The video embargo was 8 a.m. But the stores were not allowed to take pre-orders until 9 a.m. Why would that be? Why would you do that?
I don't know.
So you could get more direct sales through your own website.
Okay, sure. But like, why would DJI care?
I don't know. Money. Because money.
I don't know. Yeah, but you're charging your retailers some crazy margin and then you lose all the logistics of having to ship. I don't know. Like, I would be interested to know how much more they want that than just having all their dealers handle all the stuff.
It sounds like a pain in the ass to me. I would just want other people to do that.
That's what I mean. I feel like it's much easier to just ship that shit to retailers and have them handle pre-orders and deal with customer complaints and returns.
Customers are the worst.
That's true.
They're the worst.
Okay.
All right. Moving on. EdgeTX 2.8. It's here.
It is.
Why do we care?
That's true.
Do we care?
It's late, but it's here. It's been coming for a while, and it's finally made it. Some people might care. So this is the color UI overhaul. This has been coming for a while, but basically, if you've got a color screen radio, you've got a very fancy new UI you can use. You've got better optimization with touch screens and orientations and sizes and. Like if you got the MV14, you don't have to worry as much about the portrait stuff and that sort of thing. So huge increases there. New model select screen and method of organizing models, model labeling. Little fixes like how you set a receiver number in your model. Now if you have a duplicate, it'll tell you. That seems like obvious, and that's pretty nice that it will do that. Radio YAMLs used to corrupt, and it's harder to do that now. Just a bunch of different things in here. So,
all right. I remember these release notes look very familiar. This really has been in the release candidate for this came out a long time ago, didn't it? I'm like, I remember this.
I believe it's been quite a bit, but
all right,
I finally got it.
Well, mostly cosmetic, a few little features there, but always good to see EdgeTX moving things forward. Very exciting stuff. Next up. Oh, and there's links to all this stuff down in the video description, of course.
Next up, we've got an event we want to tell you about. If you're over in the UK or can get over to the Birmingham, UK for an International Race Day, you might be interested in this event. On January 29th, 2023 in Birmingham, UK, we've got the International Race Day with Tiny Whoops. You can join them for a good time, noon till late you can race, and a bunch of people internationally are going to show up, or at least that's the plan. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Jesse P, I think, will be there from Tiny Whoop.
And he gets around.
He does.
Any Tiny Whoop race that Jesse P comes to is going to be a good race and a good party. Jesse knows how to throw a party. So if you are able to get to Birmingham, UK, this is worth buying tickets to.
Yeah.
See here. Alrighty. Newt McFly, no Session 6 leaks that I'm aware of. Anybody seen any Session 6 leaks? I have not.
Nope.
Alright. No, that's wrong. We need this. Now it's time for It's Barely News. And just to be clear, if anybody is thinking, well, it's only about the half hour, are we going to have an early night tonight? No, because you and I have a rant. We have a rant. So stay tuned for the rant. We'll go through It's Barely News, and then we'll rant for a little bit.
Yeah. So it's barely news. First up, we've got an update from the FAA. We've got a new NPRM. It's not nearly as big as the Remote ID NPRM, but it is information that some people might be interested in. Basically, how it's going to work is they've got an NPRM that changes the air carrier definition so that it can include powered lift, which is essentially like VTOL, eVTOL, basically what would be like rotorcraft, or anything like that, to fly airlines, charters, and air tours. So we talked before about Boeing's plan to, kind of taxi people around in these air carriers, as taxis, that sort of thing. And this basically lays out rules for that, or proposed rules for that, to kind of better define that bracket. I've been through some of this, but it's a huge document. I haven't reviewed all of it yet, so I don't know necessarily where I land on it, or exactly how like where it stands as far as overreach and stuff. So.
All right. I don't think it's going to directly affect very many hobbyists, though.
Probably not. No.
Should we be commenting on this? Do we care?
It depends on where the definitions land, I would say. If there's no reason that it interacts with any of our laws, then no, probably not.
Okay.
But it will just depend,
All right. Well, that's why it's barely news. Next up, a story about the Pyrodrone gimbals. Pyrodrone coming out with custom gimbals for the Tango 2 and the Mambo, and some people were wondering, well, wait a minute. Is this official? Is Pyrodrone... What's going on? Everybody's always looking for drama, Blunty. Everybody's always like, is someone getting stabbed in the back? I need to be angry about it.
That's true.
And unfortunately for those people, it turns out it's all legit and above board.
Yes. Pyrodrone has partnered with TBS to release their gimbals that we talked about last week, so they are official.
Okay, that's nice. Going to be some nice to be able to get upgraded gimbals. Is our take, for sure.
Yep.
Another thing people are really hair trigger about is Chinese drones and spying and things. Is that what we got for this story, Blunty?
Kind of. Basically, this is a report that's basically making its headlines all over the news, the mainstream news. I think people are kind of spreading this everywhere, essentially. But basically, Congress basically put out a report that said, I don't know, I'm trying to think of how to summarize this properly.
Well, first of all, they're just DJI drones. So to say Chinese-made drones, I mean, lots of things are made in China. They could have said DJI drones. But continue.
I was going to say, that's basically the case. It's like a bunch of people were flying drones in areas that could be, subject to, security concerns if people saw pictures or something, right? And they're concerned because you can use these drones that are Chinese-made, the DJI drones that they're saying, and put an NFC hack on them and fly them over somewhere that's a security place, and then, hey, you're gonna have information.
So the situation here is there are drones flying in geofenced areas that you shouldn't be able to fly into. But as we know, it's entirely possible to hack the drone to get around the geofencing. And then we've got a number, hundreds of drones in the past few months. And it's unclear whether this is a sort of a concerted attack of some kind, or whether it is just that's how many dumbasses there are with drones in the Washington area who have figured out. It seems like hundreds of drones. It seems like the number of people who can break geofencing or who want to break geofencing is not enough that there would be hundreds of drones flying around the DC area. It does seem a little suspicious.
I would say the difference is, what is it called when you survivor bias or whatever almost is what's happening here. Because if you're in an area with more geofencing, you're probably more likely to break geofencing, and DC is heavily geofenced. That's true. Right? You really can't fly effing anywhere in DC, actually. I remember from the protest, I met some of the local people there, and they were like, there's nowhere to fly. You got to go to Virginia or something. So my guess is that you're going to have a higher percentage of people who would be interested in those kind of hacks because there's literally so few places to fly in that area.
Interesting. So it's really unclear whether this is some kind of concerted attack or whether this is just people with drones flying them in no-fly zones. Either way, it's fine that Congress is looking into it. I would like Congress to be aware of whether drones are flying over the White House or the Capitol. But also, it's not like there's people out there who are going to be like, see, the Chinese are screwing us again. And I think this story does not support that narrative.
Yeah.
So that's my take anyway. All right. Well, from the Chinese to the British.
Nope, we can miss one there. So
I skipped one. Damn. I just wanted a good segue, Blunty.
Okay. So real quick, we want to talk about humans versus AI drone racing. So we've talked about these stories before. University of Zurich has been doing these tests for a while with Thomas Bitmata and a couple other pilots. We want to give you an update here, basically. Last time we gave you an update was about 3 or 4 days before Thomas Bitmata made a summary video. It's an 18-minute video there, AI versus human drone race, and kind of summarizes better what happened at that point. But he actually released a new video, which shows the AI and how the AI learns the track and basically finds its way through based on the systems and what's actually happening on board. So I thought this was pretty neat, and I wanted to let people know this is here. So.
Yeah, we'll show just a little bit of it. There's Mr. Bitmata himself. Beautiful quad. We got some slow-mo. I see. I want to see the AI doing the AI things. Yeah, here we go. The AI tries to figure out the optimal route through the gates. And if you guys haven't seen this before, geez, it is shocking how fast the AI flew this course. I think Vanover was there as well. I think they raced Bitmata, Vanover, and others against the human, against the computer. The lines this computer was taking were unreal. And in the same way that you watch somebody like Vanover or Minchan, etc., fly, and you're like, that's inhuman. How do they do that? This was that step forward again. And right. it was crazy.
Yeah, one of the things we discussed last time was, and really, if you think about it, humans are doing the computation from off the quad as well. But we talked about how a lot of this is basically using external video sensors and then using those to do external computing and then tell the quad where to go. Versus they're also doing tests where you have most of the stuff on board and the video is all on board. So.
We just want to see I want to see one flight attempt. So here's the drone. Here, let's turn the audio on.
Is this where the control inputs are coming from?
Here we have a standard TBS tracer.
Yep.
TX.
Oh, well, there's your first problem.
Basically, now sending the control commands, local roll pitch and yaw from the computer.
That's slick.
So it's bound.
Love that little 3D print.
Okay, I will arm now. And hover.
So this is completely controlled by the AI.
Scary as. This is so scary.
Yeah.
They've never done this before. This is under an hour, and it's going to launch.
Jesus Christ. That blows me away. Oh my God. Every time. Oh, right to the ground. Total payoff. Insane. Freaking insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
Crazy stuff.
Okay, I wanted that moment for the audience who hadn't seen it before. All right. Well, from a guy from New Zealand who races drones to a British drone who, I don't know, this, I had such a good segue. We got British drones, a giant British multi-rotor evacuating somebody, the Malloy T400. The scale of this thing is inconceivable, Blunty. Like, it looks like it's just a little multi-rotor, but it's carrying a human. It's going to turn out to be a tiny model.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, they're carrying humans. No, it's basically full size. So
Yeah.
they're testing evacuation. We just want to let you know, yeah, they're testing evacuation of people, like we talked about with search and rescue before. But yeah, with the whole drone basically taking somebody in. So
Yeah.
kind of
A lot of people are going to ask, why is this better than a helicopter? We've talked about that before with the air taxis. You know, these are mechanically easier to maintain and simpler, have a little more redundancy than a helicopter.
No pilot at risk. A lot of different factors. So
Yeah. They're very cool. Appeals court sides with drone enthusiasts who challenged Ottawa County ban. What's going on here?
yeah, so this is, if you've been following these kind of drone lawsuits for a while, this one's been going on for a while. But finally, an appellate court has affirmed basically that Ottawa County in Michigan exceeded its authority. They tried to ban drones, basically whole hog, and they said no, that's not okay. And basically, the drone users won the lawsuit, won the appeal, and yeah, they weren't allowed to make the rule. One of the differences here, we see a lot of cases where states try to make, local municipalities or states trying to make rules that they aren't allowed to make because of the FAA.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'll say here is, from what I can tell, this was not using any of the FAA stuff. This was basically using a state law that said this wasn't legal.
Mm-hmm.
So while it is good for drone users in Michigan, especially Ottawa County, it may not be like it's not like an FAA precedent from what I can tell. It's
That's
like
a shame.
local law drone rules precedent. So
Yeah. I love that the appeal, it looks like from reading the decision, as quoted here in this article, that Ottawa County lost and then appealed. And when you appeal, you're supposed to point to some flaw in the previous court's decision making that the appeals court can rectify. But it sounds like they just went, "Nuh-uh, we appeal. I declare bankruptcy. I appeal." And then you just get to roll the dice again, and maybe the court will change its mind. And the court was like, "Yeah, no, that's not how it works. You lost. You still lose. Goodbye."
The court does not like when you do that, especially for the lawyers who filed that. So
yeah. What's going on with lawyers? Yeah. Shouldn't they know they can't do that? Yeah.
Depends on, there's a lot of them out there who are happy to do stuff like that. So.
Yeah. We got one more.
Yeah, last up, and it's barely news.
Before we get to the rant.
Yeah, we've got a drone has saved a hiker. We talk a lot about, again, these search and rescue options for different things. This one is no different. A drone has saved a hiker in distress. Basically, they found the hiker with an aerial drone. So we just want to let you know that yet another person was found who was stranded on a walking trail. Who was able to be found by drone. I
mean, I don't know how much details are available. How did the hiker get stranded on a walking trail? How'd that go?
I think it's pretty common, to be honest with you. Like, if you have a medical emergency, if you're on the back of a trail, nobody can come find you,
okay. I see.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Very cool. All right, well, we are going to now, the next thing we're going to do is our rants, but before we rant, and the rant has to do with remote ID. So extra juicy. We're going to rant, but first we're going to do our little plugs. Because that's how you run a professional YouTube channel. You make people sit through the commercial before you give them the juicy part.
That's true.
And the first website we're going to plug is fpvknowitall.com. That's my website, home of the ultimate FPV shopping list, where you can look for parts in various categories. We just launched the toothpick page, so if you want to get a toothpick, a bind and fly toothpick, or build your own, here are some suggested parts that we think will work well for you. I have to shout out Aaron Ciotti for thanks to his help on putting this together. That's fpvknowitall.com. What about your website?
We've also got my website, itsblunty.com, where you can come and find easy links to my Patreon, or you can come and find my troubleshooting page where you can get information about how to contact me. Discord is definitely preferred. To let me know, what your issues are and if I can help you. And there I can detail some of the stuff I can help with and some of the stuff I cannot. But if you need it, I can remote in and talk to you over the phone and do all kinds of stuff to help you out. So.
Yeah, I like to say, Blunty, that you're just as smart as me and significantly cheaper. So people should just call for a one-on-one call with you unless they specifically want to talk to me.
Some people would say I'm making bad business decisions, if that's what you say, but that's fair enough.
Me, I'm charging too much?
No, or I'm charging too little. Either way,
Well, it's just a question of supply and demand. Yeah, unfortunately, people who have more name recognition have more people who want to talk to them, and then they, as a result, can or must charge more in order to, run away the rabble. No, wait, you're not supposed to say that part out loud. But I'm happy to refer people to you. I hope, because at the end of the day, I just want people to get answers, and I just can't get on the phone with everybody. So I'm always happy when you take one of these off of my hands. Also, want to tell you guys about the Joshua Bardwell live stream clips. Dang it. Joshua Bardwell live stream clips channel. If you don't get to watch every single one of my streams, then you can get the highlights from my live streams and the news over at the Joshua Bardwell live stream clips channel. Would love to have you a subscriber over there. Cool Cat says, come on, Bardwell, you're pretty smart, but you're not as smart as Blunty. No comment. So I'd love to have you as a subscriber over on the Joshua Bardwell Livestream Clips channel. You can find highlights there. And we've got Search FPV.
Oh, yeah, Search FPV.
SearchFPV.com.
You got a search engine here that you can plug in wherever you need to go, wherever you live to. There's regions there. And then, you can type in whatever you're looking for, and you can pop it in here. There's also options to check only in stock or to, single out some of the locations or remove them from the search. So, yeah,
very cool stuff. We just added Weebleed FPV to our stable of stores. Would really love to get some Australian stores, but have not been able to get them included. But we, continuing to expand, and the more we get on here, the more useful it is. Prophet asks, why does the live stream clips have all that purple? Blunty, you picked the colors theme for that, didn't you? You picked purple because it's like my favorite color.
Yeah, it's your color, and also you'll see it when you're in looking at the thumbnails. So. Yeah,
you do all those thumbnails. You do all the work over there, actually.
Yeah.
Mr. Magoo thinks I'm overpriced. The thing is, here's the thing. You're only overpriced if you are selling less of the product than you want to sell. So if I say these tweezers cost $1 million and you all go, I don't want to buy it, that's fine. It only matters if I care about selling the tweezers. And the number of one-on-one calls that I do is consistent with how I want to spend my time. If I wanted to do that more, I would lower the price. And if I wanted to do it less, I would raise the price. That's how pricing works. A lot of people
Very true.
Yeah. I mean, you can say it's overpriced, and so you're not going to buy it, which is your right as a consumer. Alrighty. Let's do the rant, Blunty. That's all the plugs. Exactly, Cool Cat. Something is worth precisely what someone is willing to pay for it. That's the answer. Oh, I love how you titled this rant. Hold on, let me do I love how you titled. I hadn't seen that until just this minute. DJI is not going to push remote ID onto your DIY system. Where should we start?
Well, I mean, that basic statement probably needs to be said. We've heard some confusion recently that DJI is, that it is possible that DJI would essentially take the DIY units out there, in particular, the Air units and Vistas and the O3 units on newer goggles, and they would lock out them without having remote ID access. Mm-hmm. So essentially the idea would be like, if you activate in, the US and you're an FCC, then you wouldn't get any video until you plugged, your matching goggles into your phone, synced up with your phone, got GPS information, and then it unlocked to show that you were using remote ID properly. That's the idea that I've been hearing.
And this isn't just a DJI issue. It has come to a head recently because the O3 Air unit released. Every time some new product has come out, I hear people asking, does it have remote ID in it? Does it have remote ID in it? And I just wanted to get on this rant with you because there are so many reasons, both technical and regulatory, why none of this stuff has remote ID in it. And before the end of the rant, I'm going to say, if it did have remote ID in it, that could even be a good thing. But hold on. When does a piece of technology have to have remote ID in it, Blunty?
If you're selling a standard remote ID drone is basically the only requirement. So DJI,
Hallelujah.
After the date, I think the date is in December sometime where they pushed it to you. But essentially, after a certain date, then nobody can sell a drone that doesn't do remote ID out of the box, that doesn't have that standard remote ID functionality out of the box.
Right. So we're talking about fully functional drones doing what's called standard remote ID, like the DJI Mavic, the Mavic Mini, a Skydio drone, a Parrot Bebop, I don't know, and any FPV bind and fly that was delivered fully assembled and functional. So yeah, an iFlight Evoke. However, by simply removing any part of the drone, so it is no longer a fully functional, so take the receiver out, take the camera out, now it's no longer a fully built drone and no longer required to have standard remote ID in it.
I'll just say for argument's purposes, camera doesn't matter because FPV isn't a requirement to do remote ID.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, which is all the more reason this doesn't make sense to lock out your video if you don't have remote ID, but I digress. Yeah.
Okay, so also, you could use the DJI FPV system on a ground vehicle.
Right.
So
on a pole,
there is no legal regulatory requirement that a video transmitter stop functioning if it doesn't have some kind of awareness of your location, right? In the USA, at least, and that's what remote ID is, that requirement only exists that the drone refused to take off if remote ID isn't remote IDing. That only exists for fully built drones, not for anything that you build yourself. And since the O3 Air unit is sold separately from a self-built drone, there is no reason why it would have remote ID in it. Also, it doesn't have a GPS receiver. But you have to plug your goggles into your phone, and your phone has GPS. That doesn't give the system the knowledge of the location of your aircraft, which is what remote ID has to broadcast. So all the people who are asking this question, they don't understand the technical requirements of remote ID. They just think, remote ID, I'm afraid. And I understand that, but I think we want to set it straight.
Yeah. I don't think there's any reason to be concerned that DJI would lock this out. One option that could be possible is in some world, DJI certifies the O3 Air unit. Again, we don't even know if this will be technically possible, but it's assumed it might be. If they could pull MSP, use MSP for GPS, right? Mm-hmm. That would mean you need a supporting system. We've heard about ArduPilot is going to have basically a secure side that it can send data from. So it's possible that would be considered tamper evident. Anyway, basically, in some world, it is possible the O3 Air unit could be certified as a remote ID module, right? Mm-hmm. But that would mean that it would basically be an option for you to use it as a module. It wouldn't be a requirement. It wouldn't be like every single air unit gets updated and does not show video until you do this thing. That it's not only not logical, but it just doesn't it's not feasible. It's not like a thing they would do, right? And
my argument would be that if you are a person who wants to comply with remote ID, which many people aren't, and I sort of respect that, but set it aside. If you're a person who wants to comply with remote ID, then if DJI were to build remote ID into the air unit, they're basically giving you a remote ID transceiver for free. So say thank you.
Right.
But they haven't done that.
Yeah, if anything, it'll be optional. It's not going to be forced on you, and it'll be a bonus for you to use if you were so inclined to do that. Yeah. So
just to be clear, is it technically possible that DJI could write firmware so that if the air unit didn't have a GPS signal from the flight controller, then the air unit would refuse to function? Yes. Is it technically? There are lots of things that you could technically do with a small computer. That would be an awful business decision for them. There is no motivation. Everyone would just be mad at them and not buy their stuff. And there's no regulatory requirement that they do anything like that. And there's no indication that they intend to do that.
I would also point out that maybe 6 months to a year ago, I would have felt better about agreeing with you about DJI locking things out without point. But now we've seen basically the polar opposite of that, which is we've seen forward compatibility in V2 goggles and we've seen backwards compatibility in goggles too. It's like a company who's doing the opposite of locking you out from their hardware and blocking you from using things. That's the way I would look at that. So.
Yeah. So everyone is sort of scared of remote ID and worried that they're going to buy a piece of hardware and then it's going to stop working and not let them fly. And I understand that anxiety, but people making statements of fact like, don't buy the goggles too because they have remote ID in them. That sentence doesn't even parse.
Right.
And the person making that statement doesn't understand the technical requirements and capabilities and so forth. They just don't understand how remote ID works, in my opinion. That's the rant. Anything else we need to rant there? You got any more rant in you?
I know. I think that about summarizes it. I think, ultimately, if you're buying a pre-built drone with everything together, including the receiver and everything, and you can fly it out of the box, then that drone is where you're going to be worried about remote ID and lockouts and not being able to fly and all those kind of things.
Yes.
In any other case, you should not be worried about that, as any company would never want to do that on purpose. They'll be avoiding it if possible. And as we talked about before, it just doesn't make sense. So.
Right. It means that their hardware is, if a company were to do that, it would mean that their hardware is less valuable and less desirable to their customers. The only reason a company would do that is because the law requires them to, and they'll get fined if they don't do it. And at this point, the law doesn't require that, and companies are explicitly going out of their way to sort of not loophole. Loopholes are comply. They're not avoiding the law. You're complying with the law when you take advantage of a loophole. Nevertheless, we see companies actively trying to avoid this situation. So the idea that they would intentionally force it on you just doesn't make sense. So, all righty. We got one more. We got one super chat in the whole live stream. Thank you, Gin Tonic FPV, for $7 Canadian. In 5 years, hundreds of military drone grunts will be popping an SD card off the goggles above their nose before debrief. Lots of FPV drones and stuff in the military. You're not wrong. Okay, that is going to wrap us up. Let's do one more. Let's do one more meme as a palate cleanser before we close out.
Okay.
Thank you, Black Jungle, for the memes, my friend. Thank you, Blunty, as well. And thank you guys all for coming out. We will see you not next week. No That's news next week. No streams next week.
Possibly Monday for you. And no matter what, we'll be back the next Tuesday. So 2 weeks from now. So.
Yep. All righty. We'll see you guys there. Good night, everybody.